Well, folks, the weather is getting nicer and folks are starting to head out there and get active. One of the upcoming things that you can do, put on your calendar, is a walk to get to know NAMI a little better. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, they have a Thurston-Mason chapter there at Faith Lutheran Church, and I have Marilyn Roberts on the line. How you doing, Marilyn? Good to talk with you.
I am great. Good morning, Jeff. Is it morning still? We're right about the noon hour, so
It's
we're
always
crossing over.
It's always about the same time, when we're chatting. It's always sunshiny.
Yes.
We have been talking, you and I, about NAMI for a couple months now and
Yeah.
getting ways to kind of engage in Mason County as you've been in Thurston for a while now and just recently kind of expanded out into Mason County. And one of the
Right.
ways you're going to do that is on June 1st. It's going to be a beautiful Saturday morning for an opportunity to walk from Shelton High School up to Mason Health and back. This is going to be a good opportunity not only for folks to get active, but to shine a spotlight on NAMI. So let's talk a little bit about the organization in Mason County. Did I get
You bet.
everything right?
You did great. That's awesome. But you're right. We've been talking for short of a year now. I think we
Yeah.
opened our office in Shelton at the Faith Lutheran Church, which has really been a wonderful experience. People have engaged in so many different ways, supporting us. Yeah, actually, NAMI's been around in Thurston and Mason County since 1986. Do you remember that, Jeff? 1986. Where were you?
So in 1986, I was 7, so I
So,
was getting ready to head to fifth grade, maybe. I don't know, fourth
yeah, something
grade.
like that. Yeah, yeah. It was a little before, actually, kind of my time, but I didn't get involved with NAMI till the early 2000s. I
Okay.
have an adult son who lives with bipolar disorder. That's kind of what brought me to NAMI. And I like to tell people this a lot. That's how people come to NAMI is they typically are someone who lives with their own mental health condition or has a loved one or family member. NAMI provides sport groups, classes, presentations, and a lot of community engagement.
What do you
So
think it
that's
is about these last couple of years? I mean, COVID was tough. We all know that. But what do you
yeah.
think it is about these last couple of years, even before COVID, where folks are starting to feel okay bringing this up in, you know, mixed company?
Sure, sure. Yeah, actually, COVID had really two sides, right? Had a very detrimental side for not just mental health, but for physical health, obviously. Um, the way I kind of look at it is it brought on a new awareness for mental health. Um, I remember seeing a statistic about the first midway through the first year of COVID, and the Kaiser Foundation came out with a study. Everyone was like asking the question because everyone was home, right?
Yeah,
I said, does mental health affect you? What does it look like for you? And I think they said about 45% of Americans, 45%, that's a lot of people, said that they were adversely affected, felt isolated, and felt anxiety and depression, which are
sure.
clinical terms. So interesting to me when I hear that. But what we've come forward with out of COVID is we still have this intense isolation. People, whether you hear from school teachers, kids are really having adjustment issues. But if you're a senior, you haven't really left your house a whole lot.
Yeah.
So it's affected everyone from work to play, you name it. It's the lingering effect that I think is going to be around for a while.
And I see too online, and you have some article links to this too, as the way people are getting trying to help themselves out. You see ads on TV for ways to talk to therapists, and now
Sure.
you can either go in person or you can call on the telephone, or now you can text real people, and now you can even text chatbots
Yeah.
as well. And you have an article on link to from the newsroom at UW Medicine. It
Yeah.
talks about that as well as we're all just trying to figure this out together. It seems like.
Yeah. And you said the thread through all of that, talk to somebody. Um, that's how we as human beings relate. That breakdown of not talking to people, not seeing your friends, not talking to your relatives. It's hard to kind of come out of that shell, right? And it was hard before COVID. If you had a mental health condition or you had a family member that was struggling, it's like it was not the normal conversation around the dining room table.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so NAMI works really hard to kind of normalize that language, um, because it's kind of one of my weird little phrases, like the brain's an organ, right? It's like the lungs and the heart, but it has all that high level, it tells you what to do and where to go and all of those things. And so when people struggle, they don't want to talk about it. It has
Right.
this weird thing attached to it called stigma.
And so again, too, I think we're all kind of realizing that, everybody's different behind closed doors. You never know exactly what's happening
Correct.
in the home. And while you may not know what's happening in another person's home, I think a lot of folks, well, you just said it, 50% are struggling with similar issues. Everybody seems to have a similar baseline, and whether that's communicating or whether that's being able to get active again,
Hmm.
we're all realizing that, oh, even though it looks like the grass is greener on the other side, that might just be spray paint,
Correct. It's a great way to put it.
something like that.
Yeah. And people kind of by nature, they're a little timid, a little scared and nervous about talking to anybody about mental health because they don't know what it's going to look like in the end of that conversation.
Sure.
Um, Many folks that I've dealt with through the years that what I call peers in recovery, um, they find that actually that conversation is healing. And more often than not, you have a really sympathetic ear on the other end. It's like, hey, I'm really struggling right now.
Yeah.
Or like, thanks for, sharing that with me. That's kind of a privilege, right? And just having and listening and having people say, you're just a person like I am, and we all struggle, and let's talk about it and get through it together. And awareness is really the key. Um, Particularly working with kids, we're trying to help kids understand a better language around emotions, so that when things may get difficult, that they have that language and that set of I don't know, I guess rules, or not really
Yeah.
rules, but a better way to talk about it.
When
But
I think about that kind of stuff, and even my son has said this to me, or if I'm trying to be like, I'll be supportive to other people 100% of the time, but my self-talk is not supportive.
mm,
And he goes, you wouldn't say that to a person. You wouldn't talk like that to somebody else. Why do you talk about that to yourself? And that helps too. If I'm more than willing to listen and help someone as they move through this, but I feel like I'm a burden if I'm going to be the one talking to the other person. I
hmm
will gladly accept listening, and I'll listen all day if you have issues. But for whatever reason, me doing the talking to someone else feels like I'm putting a burden on them.
yeah, yeah. But really, just by listening and being that sounding board, that might be just that what that person needs at that moment.
Yeah,
And kind of maintaining the neutrality of just listening is really hard in today's world because it's not always free flowing, and it could possibly be negative. So
sure.
just really offering that lending ear, and saying, I appreciate sharing that with me. Well, maybe we'll take it further. Maybe what can I do to help you?
How
Um,
does Thurston County and Mason County kind of sit in the US when it comes
ah,
to our levels?
wow, that's a big answer. Because when we hear about it or on the news or social media or whatever, it's like, how many beds do we have to treat people with mental illness?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, is that how? When do we get to that point where we look at a bed to get support in a hospital for somebody? Um, I guess I'm old enough to and have been around long enough to know that we did a lot more for people 20 or 30 years ago. We had communities, we had faith communities, we had places to recreate. I mean, I grew up in Shelton. It's like we wanted to go do something. We were up at the high school in a basketball camp. It's
Yeah.
like that what we used to do in a normal kind of friends and hanging out, and it's kind of changed through the years. And so that natural conversation with people has become a struggle.
Yeah,
And
people
support.
just they don't really you don't know your neighbors. I was just looking outside. We have some new neighbors, and
Isolation.
isolation again. Like I know my across the street and maybe the three or four right around me, but there's
Someone you're mowing
65
your lawn
homes.
next to.
Yeah, yeah, the one you're
Yeah,
mowing the lawn, and but there's 65 homes in this neighborhood, and
yeah,
I don't, other than these three or four right across, there's no interactions. Or when we've
yeah,
tried to have community barbecues, two or three people will show up. So and then you go, well, what's the point? But
yeah.
then people need that stuff.
People need that. Any opportunity people can get to just get out. We went to the Briggs YMCA in Shelton and
Yeah,
over in Olympia both had healthy kids day. What a great idea.
yeah,
And you know what? It was fun for me. They actually had a juggler. I'm not sure any of those kids had ever seen a juggler before. They were fascinated. But just getting kids out and playing with bubbles and talking to other kids and mom and dad out, grandma and grandpa, it was a lovely event. And I have no doubt that it went a long way to help some of those folks.
yeah. Well, one way to get out and get active is coming up on June 1st. It's a Saturday. It's going to start off at the high school with a 2-mile trek from the high school to the hospital and back. It is NAMIWalks with Thurston and Mason. Good opportunities just to learn more about NAMI in our community, as well as the overall organization across the country. Plus, just kind of helping to break down that stigma of mental illness and kind of the secrecy of it, because there's a lot of people that are struggling, even the folks that you're passing day to day in the store. The National Alliance on Mental Illness is what NAMI stands for. Marilyn Roberts is the director here for the Thurston-Mason uh, program here. And let me get to the website again, NAMITM.org for Thurston-Mason. Marilyn, it's always good to talk with you. We always
Yeah, you
we
too.
always learn something.
Totally.
And we'll
Anytime.
we'll check in through the summer and see how people are doing, getting out there, getting active.
Great. Appreciate it.
Nice to talk with you.
You too.